Welcome to this episode of the Exploring Washington podcast with your host, Scott Cowan.
Everyone, this is KC Mack. He is the owner of Mack Provisions, and he is based out of Port Angeles. Casey, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and your backstory?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, my name's KC Mack, and I own a company called Mack Provisions, and I take vintage baseball mitts and repurpose them into everyday carry items like wallets and keychains and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So how long have you been doing this?
I started in 2014, but went full-time in 2018. So it's been a couple years of this being my full-time gig.
Okay, so when we talked offline before, you told me a quick story, and I'd like you to share it again. Sure. About the first time you found or you bought a baseball mitt, the buckleback.
Yep, it's cool because I sent you the picture of that. I've had it since I was, I think 12 or 13. I can't remember the exact year, but we were traveling. I played a lot of travel baseball growing up, and went to Wenatchee for a tournament, went to an antique store in Wenatchee and found this old Joe Gordon buckleback mitt from the late 20s, maybe early 30s, early 30s. And that's where I fell in love with the aesthetic of old baseball gloves. So I've had a fascination for leather and baseball and old gloves from basically then.
So what's interesting to me is when you talk to people, that we tend to fall into two camps. People that like really modern stuff, like they're totally into the latest tech, and it's something that's 3 years old is like, oh, that's so old and ugly. Right, and then there's other people that are like totally into the old, the vintage, whether it be baseball mitts or I collect old baseball cards. But so I find it interesting why when people go and look towards the historical vintage stuff. And so totally. we have a connection there. So what was the inspiration behind doing this? I mean, where did you come up with this idea, and kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, definitely. I like I just said, I love old baseball mitts. I mean, I have since I was very young, and for me, it started there. And then I got into relacing mitts. And for me, that taught me a lot about how a glove is designed and, where holes were and how to redo mitts. I've been doing that for a very long time, done a lot of relacing for mitts and fixing them up and stuff. And so in 2014, I read an article from a company called Art of Manliness. I don't even follow them, but I found an article that was talking about how to make a wallet. And in that, it showed how to cut pockets and dimensions of cards and cash. And so that really set a foundation for me. And so it's kind of these two worlds collided. I already knew a lot about baseball gloves. And then I was teaching myself and learning online how to design stuff like that. And they kind of came together. So originally I started out just making, I bought fresh hide and just went to cut leather and just used normal leather. But I did have a stack of gloves that were old, but were really falling apart. But the leather was still good. So I kind of meshed those two worlds together to start starting the foundation to Mack Provisions.
So where do you find these gloves?
Oh, all over. I have a few people who are always looking for me. They're back east, and they are professional junkers. They find old stuff. They do a lot of the legwork for me. So like I have about 10 mitts coming from a guy who's in Connecticut right now. So he's always looking for me, and I'll occasionally reach out and say any new finds, and he'll say, yeah, here's pictures of them. What do you think? So it's that to antiquing to garage sales and my girlfriend Lindsay will attest. Anytime we go anywhere and we see an antique store, we gonna 100% stop. So
stop and go dig through it for the gloves.
Yeah. Yep. I've got her trained. Well, she trained herself to find the mitts that she knows what I like and what I'm looking for, and she has a really good eye for that stuff. So she's very helpful.
Yeah. So when my wife collect different things, and
Mm-hmm.
totally not related. And so when we walk through the stores, I'm only looking for baseball memorabilia is probably the only thing I'll spend money on.
Right.
And so I run through an antique store like 3 times faster than her because I don't care about anything else, and she's looking through stuff. But it's funny what your eye begins to pick up when you're trained.
Oh yeah, totally.
So when you're buying these gloves, how new and how old are they, the ones that you're using to make the wallets?
Yeah, good question, because I don't think a lot of people realize, but I tend to stick to gloves that were manufactured from the late 30s to the late 60s. Anything before is more collectible, and anything after is made overseas. So I won't even touch mitts that are made overseas. Once glove manufacturers went overseas, you see a real decline in quality and leather, because they're outsourcing not only the labor, but they're outsourcing the where they got the leather. And a lot of times, the leather that they'd use in the glove to manufacture the gloves overseas mostly came from South America, where the cattle aren't treated as nice as they are in America, and usually they're sick cattle, and that reflects in the leather. So 40s to 60s is kind of where I camp out.
Interesting. So that's I hadn't thought about in those terms. So that's actually really interesting that you're really looking at which kind of was not baseball was really popular around World War II. So I would guess that there would be hopefully a relatively large inventory for you to find.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like yesterday, I got a glove that was manufactured for the U.S. Army during World War II. Yeah, so during that wartime, companies like Wilson and Rawlings got government contracts to build baseball gloves for special branches of the military for wartime play, especially towards the latter part of the war, like 1944, 45, where it started to really see that the Allied forces were winning. And so they let the people in the service play baseball, which is cool, because there were a lot of people, like anybody from like Yogi Berra to a bunch of other players who weren't playing, Ted Williams, names like that. Right. They weren't playing Major League Baseball, but they were playing baseball still. You just, in Germany and stuff.
Right. So is there an interesting story that you have about finding a mitt, or like, do your clients ever call you up and say, hey, I've got this glove, I want you to make a wallet out of it? Or what sort of interesting things have come up so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is fun when somebody sends me their personal glove. A lot of times when a kid gets their glove, what's the first thing they do is they write their name on it. And so I, a lot of times, get to incorporate their own handwriting on the glove into the wallet that they, I do this all the time. And it's fun because not recently, but maybe a year ago, I did one for a lady who, her husband passed away, and she had 2 boys. And I think for Christmas, she wanted to have this glove get turned into a wallet for her 2 boys for Christmas, for their father who had just passed. So it was a real special project to make something for the kids to remember their dad by. So that was something they could use every day. A glove you don't use every day, but a wallet you can. And that every time they use it or pull it out, they would remind them of their father.
Well, and not just that, with 2 sons in one glove, you one could have it, one wouldn't get it. So this way they were both able to have the memento.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
It was really special. I get it all the time, and people love to do that. They love to send in their glove, and I'll gladly take it in no matter what. I mean, unless it's cracked, or if the leather, is cracked and has showing real significant signs of wear, I can't restitch into it. It's just not possible. So there are some requirements, but yeah, if you want to send me your glove, I'll do it.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. So that would be kind of a neat way to repurpose something as a memento. I think that's really cool. So walk us through the process of, we found the glove, it's in your workspace.
Right.
Now, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, so I call this, this is what I call gutting. And so I will completely take all the lace out. That's how you get started, is you take all the lace, remove all the lace. And then a lot of times it's stitched together. So I remove all the leather from all the stitching in there. So there's the wool felt padding that you pulled out. So you can take the lace, remove the stitching, and remove the wool guts. And then from there, I have so my whole lineup's cut with a clicker dice. So in my workshop, I have probably 20 clicker dice that I have a 4-ton clicker press that cuts all this out. And so I take it over, the piece of glove, take it over to the clicker press, and then cut out each wallet type or whatever I'm making.
So explain, because I don't understand what a clicker press is. So why don't you explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah. So a clicker die is the shape of my wallet or a pocket or anything. And so instead of hand cutting, which takes a significant more amount of time to do, I have these clicker dice that have my exact dimensions, and they're perfect because they're consistent through and through. They're the same cut every time. And they're sharp metal die. And I have this press that I can take up to 4 tons of pressure that hand operate. And it's a lever that pulls down on the die and cuts out that shape of the pocket or the part of the wallet.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yep.
So we've gutted the glove. We've cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we talked earlier and when I looked on your website, you're hand stitching these.
100%. Yeah.
And you're doing a double stitch,
mm-hmm.
Which seems similar to me to how a baseball itself is stitched together.
Right. Yeah.
Am I correct that, or am I wrong?
Well, it's a little different. Baseball, you have two pieces of thread per stitch. Mine's just one, but I have 2 needles, 1 thread. And
okay.
It's a traditional saddle stitch, which means that as you pass through a hole, you put the other needle through and pull tight. So it's a very repetitive process. For me, it's really relaxing, especially on like my bigger wallet, my passport wallet called the long ball. It's like I got a mile of stitching. So I can really, go really fast, and it's kind of relaxing for me, at least.
Therapeutic, if you will.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So then, okay, so let me ask you this. So when I look at your wallets, I see, so the outer side of the wallet is the old glove.
Right.
And then you're using new leather on the inside.
Right. And so I like to, and I very early on wanted to have this contrast between the really worn baseball glove exterior with the interior made out of what is called, it's called vegetable tan. It's natural veg tan. And I think the contrast between the really new, undyed, it doesn't have any dye in it, to the baseball glove that has a lot of character and stuff is a cool contrast. And it's really cool because the natural veg tan, I get it from a company called Herman Oak. They're based in St. Louis, Missouri. They've been tan and hide since the Civil War, one of the oldest tanneries in America. Towards the latter part of the 60s, a lot of hide manufacturers moved operations overseas. And so they're like one of maybe 5 tanneries still left in America, still doing it. They have a really cool water recycling program because you require a lot of water to tan the hides. And they have a very strict EPA regulated water filtration system. So, I mean, they're a really cool company. I really could nerd out and tell you a lot about that company. But yeah, it's so it's natural in color, and over years of use, it turns to a dark, rich color. So not only do you have this new looking color versus the old color, but you also get this patina on the inside over years of use. So it's cool to see the transition and have that story with it.
Well, yes, because with each of these wallets, the leather, the exterior leather, if you will, is unique because every glove has been worn and
right.
used or abused differently. I mean, I don't think any two gloves are going to look
never
the same, Mm-hmm. So that's cool that you've got. I like that the contradict.
Yeah, the contrast.
Yeah. Contrast. And then so we've cut it, we've sewn it together. We're not done yet, are we?
No.
To it?
So okay. So I glue all the pieces together, punch my holes. Those are called pricking irons. So I prick all the holes. Then I hand stitch it, and then I go on to kind of the last step, which is called sanding and burnishing. So I sand all the edges so that they have a nice even edge, and then I take it to. I have this. It's a wheel, belt driven wheel that does the sanding on one side and the burnishing on the other. And so, if you're not a leather person, burnishing probably sounds weird, but I take beeswax and I put it on the edge of the leather, and I have this wheel that's wood, and when you apply friction to the leather, it creates a finished edge, and beeswax will create a finished edge on leather. So yeah, it's a really cool finishing touch. It creates a really smooth edge for you.
And does it kind of seal those edges? I mean, does
Yeah.
the beeswax get into the grain of the leather there?
It does, yeah. It kind of combines them all together. And it's cool because I get the beeswax from a third generation bee farmer over in Eastern Washington. So not only is all my stuff made in America, I try to source as much materials from as local as I can, and the beeswax made over there in Eastern Washington.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we didn't ask, where's the thread come from? Are you using what type of thread and why, I guess?
So I use a linen thread, and I put a lot of research into this, but linen thread for me it's not only durable, it lasts long, and if it ever wears, I can restitch it. So the hard part about using a man-made thread is it's gonna last longer than your leather. And so when over time that thread is going to wear on the leather, and then eventually it's going to perforate the leather, so you can't really fix it. Whereas any sort of natural thread like linen, it will wear before the leather, which is easy because I can just restitch. And if somebody ever has a wallet that needs to be restitched that I made them, I'll gladly do it for them for free. Okay. And that thread comes from France. It's the only piece of material that I don't have that's from America, but it is the best linen thread on the market. So
okay, very cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool company. They've been around since like the early 1800s making linen threads.
Okay. So, I mean, you've taken great care in picking your suppliers and the components of your product. I mean, right. You're not just going to Walmart or Home Depot or something and buying something off the shelf because it's on sale. You're sourcing your vendors, and you've picked good people to work with.
Yes. If I'm going to try to, highlight anything from this conversation, is I've put a lot of time and effort into sourcing my materials. I'm not going to lie, they're a higher end wallet as far as pricing. And I think my MSRP is reflective in the materials and the process of making it. So if I could highlight anything, is I put a lot of effort into sourcing good mitts and materials to make these wallets or items.
No, sure. Cause they're gorgeous. I mean,
yeah,
I've seen
thank you.
They're really, I mean, when we were first told about you, I'll explain to everybody how you and I
sure.
Were introduced. Somebody from the Western League posted about you on Facebook, mm-hmm. and that you were going to be on Evening Magazine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's baseball and it's Washington State. This is like my wheelhouse. This is cool. Yeah. And so I'd never heard of you.
Right.
I'd never heard of you. Not that I know everything, because I don't, but I'd never heard of you. And I go and I check out your website, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Cause you have a really, for me, I really like what you've done online with your online presence.
Awesome. Yeah. I put a lot of effort into trying to make that nicely.
It looks great. And so I shared it with a couple of my friends saying, hey, have you guys heard of this? And, they're other baseball fans, and they're like, no. And so they were checking you out. And so I reached out to you, and we had a conversation, and and then your Evening Magazine episode dropped. And I don't know, how did that go for you? Did you see an uptick in interest? I mean, tell us about that.
Oh yeah. I was just comparing my April 2020 to my April 2019, and it's like 200% increase in profit and interest. So yeah, I mean, by and large, it was unbelievable. Yeah.
Which is interesting because at the time of this conversation, we're I don't want to say locked down, but we're not moving freely about the state.
No.
And so you read in the paper about all these businesses who are suffering financial hardship and struggles.
Right.
And yet you're having a good month.
Unreal.
And
it's so
awesome.
crazy. I can't believe it. When the feature was dropped, I was like, I remember saying to my girlfriend Lindsay, if I get one sale, I'll be happy. And that night, I had literally one point we had 1,000 people on my website, which I've never seen. That's
wait, you had 1,000
at once. Yeah.
At one time.
Yeah. So my website, I can see, I have a feature. It's called Live View. So I can see how many people are on my website at one time. In the past, I've gotten excited when I saw like 5, but then that night I took screenshots on my phone because I was like, holy cow, look at this. This is crazy. Just the amount of people on my website at once was awesome. Unbelievable. So
that's great. I really am happy to hear. I just love the fact that people are being creative, doing things, and here you are running a business selling baseball glove wallets. I think that's not the only thing you sell, but I think it's just cool that because you could be, doing anything. You could be working at a corporate job, and now here you are doing something creative that you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, it's not like it's easy, one, running your own business, and two, trying to be profitable at the same time. I come from people who run their own businesses. My dad owns 2 businesses in Spokane. One of the businesses that he runs was owned by my mom's dad. That started in 1950. So, there's business has been in my family for a long time. And so, anybody who owns a small business knows that it's incredibly hard to do. And this is a one-person shop. It's run everything by me. So, if I email you, it's for me. If the mitts I'm looking for is all done by me, handmade by me, shipped out by me. So it's tough to run a small business these days. And I'm just thankful that people are interested and have, keep me, pursuing my dream.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we kind of jumped over your backstory, how you Washingtonian.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, so you're in Port Angeles now.
Yeah.
But you grew up in Spokane, correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. So why? What happened? Where you left Spokane to play baseball, right?
Yeah. So I, out of high school, I got a scholarship at Green River Community College to play there. After Green River, I went back to Spokane and played at Whitworth University. And so once I stopped playing baseball, I was so burned out. My brother and I had been playing competitive baseball from a very early age. And I just got to the point where there's a lot of politics in college ball and a lot of, I guess I got to choose my words wisely here, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on that I was just sick of. So I quit baseball and I moved to Alaska. And I lived up there for about 10 years. And I met a girl who was from Alaska but living in PA. So I had to move here to be with her. And then, PA,
Port Angeles.
Yeah, sorry, PA, Port Angeles, not Pennsylvania. A lot of people get that mixed up, and that's the abbreviated. Sorry.
Yeah, you sound like a local, PA.
Right.
So how long have you been in Port Angeles?
About a year and a half, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
Yep.
And she's been in Port Angeles for longer than that.
Yeah, since 2015. So, her and her family moved down. Her dad works out at the prison, Calm Bay. So they moved from Juneau, and she's also originally from Woodby Island. But before that, her parents are from Seattle and that whole kind of general Seattle, Tacoma area. So,
right.
Yeah, so we're both Washingtonians, through and through.
So, we typically always ask people, tell us some of your favorite places. I mean, we're all about talking to small businesses. We're all about, nothing wrong with, large companies, but they don't need promotion. Tell me some cool things in Port Angeles. Where should somebody listening to this, if they go up to PA, where would be a good place for them to go to?
Right. I would say by and large, my favorite place is Lake Crescent. Anybody who I think thinks of Port Angeles also thinks of going to that lake. It's a beautiful lake. It's really cool. It's really cold. Last summer we went swimming probably half a dozen times. It's a cold water, but it's really fun to go out there and go swimming, and there's beautiful mountains. And I mean, Port Angeles is seeing a huge uptick in, I think, tourism. A lot of people are coming to here to kind of escape, the busyness of Seattle and go camping out here. And it's a really cool place because we've got the ocean, obviously right at sea level. And then we have these huge dramatic mountains, the Olympics behind us. And so just the scenery all in between is it's awesome. So yeah, Lake Crescent's circle back. Lake Crescent's probably one of my favorite places.
How about in the rest of the state? Like when you were growing up in Spokane, was there anything in Spokane that you thought was, the younger you, was there something as a kid you thought was cool in Spokane?
Growing up, we had a cabin out on Lake Roosevelt, which is a little bit more west to Spokane. But yeah, I mean, it's such a cool state, right? We have the west side that's really kind of mountainous and, evergreen. And then you kind of go towards the middle and eastern, and it becomes kind of that deserty place. And so a lot of my youth is spent in the kind of, Lake Roosevelt is a river basically. And just growing up with really hot weather and desert, weather. So it's kind of a cool place. So I love the contrast between those kind of two different areas in our own state. It's very neat.
So to come back to your company, Mack Provisions, You don't just do wallets, you do keychains, you're doing some other leather stuff. What else are you? I say you guys, and it's just you, but what other products are you doing right now? And is there anything that you think you might be doing that you want to talk about? I don't know that there is, but Sure. Is there something new on the horizon?
Yeah, I've put a lot of time and effort into thinking about it. So just as an aside, my background, before Mack Provisions, I worked up in Alaska for a company called Alaska Tent and Tarp. And so I have, some sewing background in, making tents and tarps. So, I think I have an industrial sewing machine. And so I think my next step is going to start making masks, just because a lot of people, they're not leather, but they're a different product that I can kind of work into my lineup. And so I've been sourcing American-made canvas and American-made elastic, American-made thread to build a mask, especially when fall comes. I think I'll be launching that just because there is that prediction that when fall comes, we're going to have a hit. And so right. I think making masks is kind of my next bigger project, I think.
That's really, really interesting. So canvas, U.S. canvas elastic. All right, very cool.
Yep. You need they say a tightly woven fabric, and so this is going to be a 10-ounce canvas, so it's kind of on the heavier side, but definitely close knit, which is what they want for people who are wearing a mask.
Very okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to check you out, where can they go? Where do they find you on social media? Where do they find you online? All of that. Go ahead and give a shout out.
Yeah. So it's just mackprovisions.com. And then I'm pretty active on Instagram. Mostly is where I camp out, just because I like to take photos. I have a nice full frame camera, so I try to take some really nice shots of my product. So that's just at Mack Provisions.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for being with us here today, and continued success, because I love your stuff. It's cool, and I think everyone should go check you out at mackprovisions.com, and we'll put a link below in the show notes so that they can click on it if they want.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you want to say?
No, Scott, I just really appreciate you being interested. It's been nice to, you and I to talk. We've probably chatted 3 times, and it's just nice to develop friendships and work with other companies like you. And I love what you guys are doing. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It's genuinely, Yeah, in fact, just not that anybody cares. This is more like I should hit the button and stop recording to share this, but it's like my next business card is going to be based on the old OBAC tobacco cards.
Right. Yeah.
And we're gonna my designer buddy's taking that layout. I'll probably cut this out of the show. Maybe I'll leave it. Who knows? But anyway, we're taking that old tobacco card layout,
Right.
and we're going to have my image in a jersey,
right.
and it'll be the business card, and that's really, and I can't think of a better place to put that than in one of your wallets, because it's just everything ties together.
Yep. Boom. Yeah. For the sake of baseball, just keep this in there, because anybody who knows those old tobacco cards will love that design in your business card. So. Very cool.
So let's if you got a second, let's just go some completely different. That it was kind of the initial thing that brought you to my attention. What, if anything, and I'll put you on the spot, you may not know how to answer this, but what, if anything, can you say about the Western League? And because there's teams in Bellingham, Port Angeles, Wenatchee, Yakima, Walla Walla, Kelso,
and then there's the Bend Elks.
Portland Pickles,
and then team in Victoria, BC.
Right. So for the most part, it's a Washington State league.
It's basically a Washington, some Oregon, some BC. So, but yeah, basically Washington State's the through and through.
So when we talked earlier, you know a couple of the coaches in the league and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find a lot of background on that league.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of ball players? I mean, these are college kids, right?
Yes. Yeah. For the most part. For the most part, I think there are some cases where they're getting a high school kid who's graduated and going into college. But I think that's pretty rare. But for the most part, this is a very competitive league. I mean, very, very, very high end ball players. My brother played. Multiple years with the Bend Elks and the Walla Walla Sweets. And so he played at Seattle U. And so mostly, not always, but there's a lot of D1 players and some D2 and some NAIA kids. But for the most part, these are kind of big league breeding grounds. It's a wood bat league, so a lot of scouts come to the games. And when I was in college, I did a partial summer with the Spokane Riverhawks, which was at one point part of that league, but had dropped out. So a lot of guys, really good ball players who play in this league end up going pro, basically, get drafted.
And is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the Western League, for many of these kids, the first competitive league with wood bat that they're playing in?
It depends, So like when I went to Green River, that was the community college system in Washington State's all wood bat. So it really depends. But for the most part, a lot of these kids come from their school using a metal bat and then play the summer in wood. But it's been in my experience that when you play college ball, you do your fall ball, your winter cuts all with a wood bat, and then you come into league play with metal bats. So for the most part, people are used to using wood.
Okay, so it's not just some radical transition that they're used to swinging, this
right.
The ball comes off the bat a little differently.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of science into it. I mean, obviously wood's a natural material. And so if you make a mistake with your swing and, hit it on a part of the bat, you could end up breaking it. Whereas with a metal bat, obviously you might get away with a certain, with some muscling up a ball compared to a wood bat. So there's obviously some disadvantages to using a wood bat, which makes it interesting, makes it fun.
So do you go to well, right now there's no games, but last year, did you go to some of the Port Angeles games?
Yeah. Well, I went to a few Lefties games. It was fun. The owner is Matt Acker. I'll give him a little shout out. He was my college coach at Green River. So it's kind of a small world. I had no idea he was here. Before he used to own the Kitsap Blue Jackets, and I thought he was kind of still there doing that. But when I came to PA, he had started the Lefties, I think a couple years ago. It's 2016. He moved from Bremerton to PA, and they're huge for this community. People love going to Civic Field, watching the Lefties play, and it's a fun environment. A lot of people drinking beer and hanging out.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. The Wenatchee Apple Sox play at the community college, and it's the owner purchased them the current owner purchased them a couple of years ago.
Right. Right.
And they have really put a lot of time and effort into the fan experience
Right.
and making it a lot of fun to go, and over here in Wenatchee, June and July, it's in the 70s, 80s, so it's nice and warm out. It's not like as a kid, I grew up in Tacoma, and so I'd go to Cheney Stadium, and
Right.
that place is brutal unless it's just so cold.
Yep.
I mean, it's just miserable.
Yep.
But over here, the Apple Sox, they do a really, I'm super pleased with how they treat the fan.
Oh yeah.
And the quality of play is good. I mean, it's a fun thing. And, I'll recommend anybody that's in one of those markets to make sure you go check out a team, because it's great entertainment and good competitive baseball.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, these are guys who are, have their foot into the next, league, which is basically playing minor league ball, big league ball. And so there's a slew of players who have played in this league that are now playing in the major leagues, which is, so you're basically getting a big league experience for, the games I think are like $10. So, I mean, real cheap.
And that's for a great seat.
Yep. And that, yeah. And that's for, like the best seat in the house. And it's a real fun experience. And not only does it creates a cool atmosphere, but it's also like we have a couple food vendors that, they probably do really good. And it's a good, experience for a lot of companies and a lot of people supporting local communities. And I mean, America's the pastime. I mean, I think we kind of gather around this sport, and it's good for the soul, good for the just for camaraderie, good for our people.
Yeah, the one thing about baseball that that makes it completely different than almost all the other popular sports, and certainly different than football, basketball, and hockey, is the game will last as long as it takes. There is no halftime. It's going to go on, and it's 9 innings or 18 innings sometimes.
There's a lot of rules and regulations to the game that are so unique. I mean, yeah. There's no time frame. There's 9 innings, which is, I guess, a time frame, but that plays out how it wants to play out. There's not a football field has a universal, 100 yards, right?
Right.
Baseball, we have all unique different parks. You just have to have 90 feet, between bases and stuff, so it's a unique sport. And I think it reflects us as Americans. It's a really,
and the parks you're right. The parks are all radically, no, well, there was a while in Major League Baseball where they were kind of standardizing them in the 60s and 70s. Those the Astrodome and things like that, where they were just the parks were pretty sanitized and boring, in my opinion.
Yeah, look at Kingdom. I mean, for years we played there.
Yeah, I tried to block out the Kingdom in my brain, but Six Stadium before that in Seattle. But you start looking at the old dimensions of some of the old ballparks, and you look at the dimensions of the new ballparks. Mm-hmm. Safeco or whatever it's called now, T-Mobile Park. That was part of that whole renaissance of retro looking stadiums.
Right.
And it's neat that, each ballpark, I think, is Houston's got like the center field. It rises up.
They removed it, but yeah, at one point they had a hill in the back area.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of
even their home run fence. I think it's kind of similar to the Green Monster. They have a really short porch in left field, but they have a really tall fence, kind of like the Green Monster in Fenway. So I think each park is unique, and I think it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been to the Port Angeles ballpark, but it's not going to look like the Wenatchee ballpark.
No,
and it's not going to look like the ballpark in Walla Walla.
No, the one here, Civic Field's basically a football field converted into a baseball field. So I think the high school football plays there during the in the fall. So they switch over. It's unique, but that's the point of baseball. You can get up and play anywhere.
All right, exactly. And so we went way off tangent on this, but that's okay.
That's all good.
It's my show. I can do what I want. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on. And we'll put in the show notes where people can find you, and we encourage everyone to check out Mack Revisions, and even more than checking them out, take a look at those handcrafted items. They're beautiful, and you should have one in your wallet, or it should be in your pocket, I guess, not your wallet. But anyway, all right, I'm gonna sign off. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, KC.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Exploring Washington podcast. Check for our presence on social media pages, and let us know if you know of someone whose contribution to the state needs to be heard. You can reach us at podcast@explorewashingtonstate.com.